Just the other day, which was the first of the 10 tests, whichever was tested. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, Avraham was tested with 10 tests. Was Lech Lecha the first test? Or maybe what's alluded to earlier, as we discussed the Rakazdim, where he was given the ultimatum, either bow to the idol, go into the kiln. Maybe that was one of the earlier tests. So we'll see in a moment. From the Midrash, it's clear that the first of the 10 tests was Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha me'artzchem eladchem. That was the first of the 10 tests. Or Kazdim was not a test, which we discussed why that was not a test. Of course, all the tests, if you analyze them, was not a question whether should he do it or should he not do. He did not question Hashem. He was questioning. I mean, here he's told to abandon his family, although he believed maybe he could have made a difference, which was only due to their misunderstanding. Nevertheless, Hashem says, pick yourself up and go. He went immediately. Didn't ask a question. Allow me to try again. He comes to Canaan. That's the ultimate. And all of a sudden, he's struck with a famine 3 months later. He has to leave, goes to Egypt. Didn't question Hashem. So the 10 tests, according to the Midrash, it's not a question, does he do it, does he not do? He's totally negated Hashem. He doesn't ask questions. Who am I to ask? I understand that God understands things which I don't understand. And Hashem being the Daim Emes, that Hashem does not renege on anything that he says. It's not a question. That I don't understand, it's not a problem if I don't understand. But he cites the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer over here in the footnote in the Midrash, that Pirkei Rebbe Lezer holds that Avraham Avinu originally was a fugitive, and he had 13 years in a cave, and he was a pariah. So that was the first of the 10. Then there was the Kazdim, to kill the Kazdim, and Lech Lecha was the third test, which is not according to the Midrash, because the Midrash says explicitly the first test was Lech Lecha. Because the Midrash says just as the first test was Lech Lecha, the 10th test was the Akedah, which was also Lech Lecha. You should go to the location where I will show you and bring your son up as a burnt offering, as an olah. That's the Midrash. And that's the position of the Rambam. The test was Lech Lecha, and the closing test was the Akedah, which is not the position of Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Lezer was a Tana, Rebbe Lezer ben Urkenis. He could argue with Chazal, with the Midrash. He holds there were 2 tests that preceded the Lech Lecha. Okay? Now, we discussed many times the significance of the number 100, if you remember. We find that before Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, his height, his dimension was from earth to heaven. After he ate of the Eitz Hadas, the Midrash tells us, Sama Koshroch Kappa Olav, Hashem put a Kaviyocha, his palm upon him, and he was minimized to 100 amma. He was only 100 amma in height, 100. So what is the consequence of evil? It brings about the number 100. 100 is a representation of evil. We find in the Heichal, in the Beis HaMikdash, the wall was 100 amos high. Why was it 100 amos high? The Gova Heichal was 100 amos, the covered sanctuary. So we once mentioned the name of the Kli Yakar, because what is the objective and the value of the Beis HaMikdash? Atonement. What are you atoning for? For the Chet. Why does a person sin? Because of the evil inclination. So this is the 100, which counters the 100. It addresses the effect of the 100. That's why the Gova, the height of the Heichel, was 100 amos. And that's why he says, we find that Yaakov Avinu, when he returned from Lavan to come back to Canaan, it says the first thing he did, he bought a piece of property for Mea Ksito, for 100 Ksito, that was the denomination of the currency. And then it says, Vayiven Lov Mizbeach, Lashem. Then he built a Mizbeach on that piece of property. So then the Kli Yakar explains, why does the Torah share with us the value of the property was 100? So that he says, he explains, because since 100 is the number which counters the evil, because that was the consequence of Beit Zadas, therefore he purchased that location in preparation for what? For the atonement. He purchased it to build a Mizbeach. That was the Kli Yakar over there. So the 100 counters the 100. Okay? We once mentioned that in the name of the Balaturim, that Avraham Avinu had a child at the age of 100. That's when he became Avraham in the real sense. That's when he became the father of the patriarch. At 99, he had the name change, but at the age of 100, he had Yitzchok. Yitzchok was the actualization of what? Of Yaakov. So that was 100. Why 100? Again. Okay? Now, over here, the Medrash tells us, Medrash not Chuma, Lech Lecha. Rashi over here says, what's the Lech Lecha? She said, Lech, what's Lech Lecha? Literally means go for it. It's in your best interest. Rashi is la noscho l'tovoscho, for your benefit and for your goodness. The Medrash says, Lech Lecha, Mao Lech Lecha, Lamed Shloshim. Numerically, Lamed is 30. Chof Esrim. Chof is 20. Hareola Gematria Meo. So if you have Lech Lecha, each Lech is 50. So Lech Lecha is 100. What is that? What is he telling Avram? Romaz lo shetia ben Meo v'tolid ben kosher. At the age of 100, you're going to have a ben kosher. You're going to have that special child. Yitzchak was conceived in what? Was conceived after Avram was circumcised. That child is going to be a ben kosher. At the age of 100, you're going to have ben kosher. That's the Lech Lecha. What does it mean? That means Hashem is alluding to him that he's the representation of what? To be the one to counter the evil. That's Lech Lecha. At 100, you have that child. So it's 100 versus 100. We'd explained yesterday that we say in Psukim Zimra, Atu Hashem Elokim Asher b'chata ba'Avrom. You chose Avrom without the hay. V'otzeisum u'kazdim v'samta shema Avrom. And you took him out of the kiln of Kazdim, and you made his name to be Avraham. Although when he came out of the kiln, he was 75 years old, a little bit less. He only became Avraham at the age of 99. The father, Yitzchak, who was born to him at the age of 100. So when did Avram, and we mentioned in Medrash yesterday, quoting a pasuk Shir Hashirim, that Avraham Avinu, because he had done that act, he merited to be the person that he was going to be in the future. That potential already was activated for the future, that he would be the choma, he would be the wall that's going to deflect every battle against spirituality. And what does it say right afterwards? We say, and then Hashem entered in the covenant to give him the land of the 7 nations of Canaan. And what did they represent? They represented evil. And therefore there was a mitzvah, los chai kol neshama. You have to annihilate all the members of Canaan. But that task was given to Avram. Only after he came out of the Kibshon Aish, after the kiln, he has that level of representation. He's the one who's going to deflect and have that grandson, Yaakov, who's going to be the one who's going to be the counterforce against all evil. That's Akol Kol Yaakov Yadayim the Esav. This is what we mentioned yesterday. That's the 100. We've mentioned in the past, the Medrash says, Yaakov, the letters of Yaakov's name, each letter alludes to something else. Yud is Aser Sadibros. Ayin is Shivim Zakenim, the 70 elders of the Sanhedrin. Kuf is Govo Heichel. The Kuf of Yaakov is the height of the Heichel, of the covered sanctuary. Beis is Beis Luchos Abris, the 2 tablets of the 10 commandments. So what's Yaakov's essence? Yaakov has the Kuf in his name. He's the one who counters evil. He's the one who fathered the 12 tribes. That's Klal Yisrael. Now, the pasuk says, if you will go to the land that I will show you, the Eskol Lagoy Godol, I will make you into a great people. So the Medrash asks, what's the Eskol? It should say, I will place you to be a great nation. Eskol seems to be, it's a creation. So the Midrash tells us, Eskol ain't say Vasimcha. Doesn't say Vasimcha, Elo Eskol. Amalo, Oscha Nibori Bri Chadosha. You will become a new creation. Although you're a human being in the physical sense, which is identical to every other human being, I will make you a new creation. As it says regarding at the beginning of creation, God made the heaven. God made the 2 luminaries. Rav Pinchas says, what's the Eskol L'goy Godol? I will make you into that great nation. When Klal Yisrael received the Torah at Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu will be Goy Godol. That's when they became the Goy Godol. When that potential was actualized at Sinai, this is when that metamorphosis came about, and that's when it was Atem Kriyim Odom. When did we become the Odom? Adam forfeited his classification of Odom. We assume that profile of Odom that was at Sinai. That's Eskol Odom. Odom, it's a new creation. Before we were at Odom, how did we become Odom? It was Eskol, it was a new creation. It's a Bria Chadosha. Until then, who is the nation that counters the 70 nations who are on the other side of the equation? It's Klal Yisrael. We are 71. The Maral always says 71 is 8. 7 is Teva's nature, the natural order. What supersedes 7 is 8. That counters the 7. Klal Yisrael is the 71st nation for that reason. Okay, just clarifying it a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot to speak about. This is after Avraham passed away, and Yitzchak wanted to leave Canaan to go to Egypt, like his father went. Hashem says, "Don't go out of the land. Remain in the land." And despite the famine, you'll be okay. You have grazing lands for your sheep, for your flocks, and you'll have food. It says that year, although it was a famine year, what was the yield of that year? Meyo Shorim. Right? That's what the pasuk says. It was 100-fold of what normally be, and this was a famine year. So what does that say? Despite being a famine year, which seemingly is an impossibility, he had 100-fold. What does that 100 represent? That represents the essence of Yitzchak. Yitzchak is a continuum of that 100 to counter what his father countered, and what Yaakov countered, and what Klal Yisrael counters. It's the 100 versus the 100. What solidified the 100? The last test according to the Medrash was the Akedah. The Akedah Satan wanted to prevent that taking place. Why? Because whenever Satan prosecutes us to the point where we should be destroyed based on the attribute of justice, what quells that prosecution? The schus of the Akedah. That is that's the 10th test. That's Lech Lecha. That's 100. Lech Lecha represents 100. That solidifies the 100. That means we are permanently the force to counter the negative. Parshas Lecha. V'yelech Avraham kashediber elov Hashem. We mentioned yesterday Chaim HaKodesh. V'yelech ito Lot. And who went along with him? Lot. Avram ben Chomei Shana v'Shim Shana b'Tzeis Mechoron. Avram was 75 years old when he left Choron.
Rabbi, it seems a little odd.
I made it a point. It says Vayelech ito Lot. Remember? It doesn't say Vayelech imo Lot.
Right.
Ito always means an adjunct, secondary. At this point, Lot was secondary to Avram. We're going to see after they came back from Egypt, when Lot became a very wealthy man, it says imo Lot. Lot saw himself as his uncle's equal. And as a result of that, they had this disagreement. His shepherds were actually grazing their flocks in other people's lands. And that's when they split. Now it's Ito. Now Lot is what is secondary to Avram, and he understands that. The moment he becomes has that wealth, I have in the mind of my own, I'll make my own decision. You're not going to dictate my life. We'll discuss this later. Good, Ernie, what do you want to say?
Yeah.
Initially, it says Lot, V'yelech Avram, it says V'yelech Ito. Lot went with him. What do you mean? Like Avram took Sarah, he took Lot. Right? He was responsible for his nephew. What does it say? Lot went with him initially. I'm just asking you a question in another order. So the Rav Kalatsky points out over here, Hashem had said to Avram, leave your homeland, leave your countrymen, leave your family. You should disconnect from your family. That included Lot. So what was Lot doing there? You know what the answer was? Ve'elechite Lot. Lot forced himself upon Avraham Avinu. Avram really shouldn't have taken Lot. Later, there's all kinds of problems with Lot. After he took the initiative to come, Avram agreed to take him because he didn't want to shun him. That's the way the Orach Chaim learns the pasuk. Initially, it was Vayelech. That was Lot's own initiative, and then Avram agreed to take him. Therefore, it says Vayikach Avram Esarei Ishto Lot ben Achiv. Because he points out later, when did Hashem appear to Avram later? Only after Lot separated himself from Avram. But as long as he was with Avram, Hashem did not communicate with Avram. Because the precondition was, this representation of family cannot be with you. So it's only Achi, Parad me, men of Lot, after he separated himself, then Hashem appears to Avram for that reason. But I want to point out something else. Vayikach Avram Esarei Ishto Lot ben Achiv. There's kol rechusham asher rachoshu. All their wealth that they amassed, the possessions, that's a nation also b'choron. V'yetzu lechas ar Canaan, v'yevo ar Canaan. They left to go in the direction of the land of Canaan, and they arrived in Canaan. Now, why is it important for us to know that he took his wife and that he took his nephew, as we just explained? Torah has to tell us. What does he have to tell us? He took all his possessions. It's understood. If you have possessions, you take your possessions with you. Right? It's not he has to create new wealth before he goes. Whatever he had, he took with him. Well, why is that important for the Torah to tell us? Nefesh also b'choron, Rashi says, those are the people who converted to monotheism. They came along with him. Rashi, Asher also b'choron, shechnisham tachas kanfi ashchino. He brought them under the wings of the divine presence. Avraham Magaris Hanoshim, Sarah Magaris Hanoshim. Avraham converted the men, Sarah converted the women. Amalav Akosov Kilo Osam. And that's considered he made them. Truth shall mikro. Avodu Shvachu Shekonumen. Speaking to their physical possessions. Means amassing. The wealth that they had amassed in the Choron. Why is that important for us to know? Now, Hashem said to him, if you want to be effective, you must leave that location, go where I will go to, where you must go. There's a halacha in the Torah, it's called Erin Dachas. What's an Erin Dachas? You have a city where the majority of the city become idolaters. So the Torah tells us that all the idolaters of the city have to be killed. The ones who are not idolaters, they leave. But all the possessions must remain in the city, even the possessions of the non-idolaters, and everything is burnt. Everything is destroyed. Why? Because that city represents an idolater city. Everything is considered spiritual infectious waste. Therefore, it all has to be destroyed. Avraham here is told to leave because this location represents something which interferes with your ability to bring people to monotheism. It has a negative representation. So I would think maybe all the wealth that he amassed there, his possessions, he should leave it behind. There should be no connection to the past. It's a new beginning. Torah says no. That wasn't the case. He was able to take. It was only in terms of influencing people, but in terms of what it represented, it wasn't quite the Erin Nidachas. Even though they were all pagans there, it was not Erin Nidachas. Therefore, Torah tells us he took all the material possessions with him when he left Torah for that reason.
Rabbi.
He traveled through the land to the location of Shem, which is Elon More. And the Canaanites were there. And what's the Chiddush? We know they're there. It's the land of Canaan. So first, Avram Boretz Nichlesato. He went into the land. Arme Shem. Lespalel b'nei Yaakov she'avo lilochim Shem. You know, the whole story of Shimon and Levi. Having two youngsters, they destroyed the city. They could have been killed, easily been killed. Miraculously, they were not killed. So this whole story was the third day of the circumcision. They were too weak, so on and so forth. But still, we're talking about two people destroying the whole community. And there were women who could have also done certain things. It's only due to Avram's tefillah, they was mispalel, that they should be protected. They should not be destroyed. Elon Morehu Shem, Hereo Hagrizim Harevo. Hashem had shown Avram the future, the story, the Mount Evel, Hargrizim, Shem Kiblu, Yisrael, Shuas Torah. Right, that's Oru, Boruch, Hashayokim, Oru, Shalo Yokim. Those stories, 6 tribes on one mountain, 6 on the other, the Levim in between. And they said, Amen, whether it was the positive or the negative. He showed them ultimately that's what's going to be. That's what this location represents.
What does it have to do with saving Shimon and Levi, though?
No, two things. Two things. Firstly, he came to Shem. What does Shem represent? That's those stories of Shimon and Levi. That's Shem.
Right.
He prayed for them that he has already sensed that his future progeny their lives are going to be in jeopardy. There's going to be a battle in Shem, and his children should be saved. They should not be killed.
That's really my point, Rabbi. That's my point. If he knows that in the future, so why can't he know that Lot is going to be the
Because he only knows what
progenitor of David and Mashiach?
Because you only know what Chazal tell you know. Everything we know about anything is because it's part of the Masorah. And Chazal are sharing with us what the Masorah is. That's part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. You know, why did he reveal to them? Who knows? Did he know? Did he know? There's no indication he did know.
If it's in the Zohar, is that considered chazal?
What the Zohar says he knew it?
Yes.
It's
That's
hard
right.
to-
That's where I read it. I didn't make it up.
we don't realize what kind of Kabbalist we got on this on the Zoom here.
I'm not a Kabbalist. I'm a Rabbi Artscroll.
Okay. We find that after he committed incest, Avram separated himself from it. It was so unacceptable. He was a disgrace. If he understood what was coming down the pike with Lot and his daughters, I mean, he should have done everything to prevent this from happening. He was a disgrace to humanity, and definitely a disgrace to Avraham Avinu. Man commits incest with his own daughters. That's what's hard. I'd like to see the Zohar inside.
The argument against that is we also